Welcome to another edition of Boilers Extra from Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. I'm Nathan Baird from the Indy Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
You know what? I just realized I keep standing on this side, but it keeps putting my name under you. It's probably throwing people off, all of our first-time listeners as our watchers as we bring people to the podcast. But not a great day for Purdue in either basketball or football. We'll get to the Dillon Thieneman news today, which was kind of, I think, inevitable at this point. But we'll talk basketball first. 70-66 loss to number 18 Texas A&M here in the Indy Classic. And I thought another game where there's sort of a formula developing here. Maybe it's too simple that, okay, yeah, they try to deny the post to keep the ball away from Trakoff and Wren, and they clamp down on Braden Smith and try to make somebody else beat them. But that's how each loss has really followed through, plus making Purdue turn the ball over a lot. There's just a lot of things coming into this game that you would have thought, well, this is like the one or two things Purdue can't afford to let happen, and that's exactly what happened today.
Yeah, and, it was evident very early on that they wanted to push Fletcher Lawyer off the three-point line. They wanted to not let the ball get – you want to no post entries, basically, the way that they defended with Texas A&M using – kind of two defenders on the baseline and putting a guard kind of between the guard and Kaufman-Wren to deny the entry passes. That's a formula that worked for Zach Edey sometimes until Purdue found ways to beat it. It's something that Trey Kaufman-Wren hasn't, had to deal with yet. And he's going to deal with it more and more. And I think he said after the post-game press conference or during it, they denied me the ball, but we're going to have to figure it out because it's going to happen again. So
that is kind of what I keep coming back to. It's like, you lost by 4 on a semi-neutral court to a really good team. That in itself is not like a catastrophe. But I think as you try to project in this team getting into huge Big Ten games on the road, Big Ten tournament games, whatever, but NCAA tournament games for sure against the best teams in the country, this is what people are going to keep trying to do. And like, what is your answer for it? What is your answer when Trakoff and Wren is taken out of it? Like, how do you then, are you really going to let a team both limit him, and we can talk about how much he was limited and how much maybe he just didn't play all that well. He did have 5 turnovers before fouling out. You've got Braden Smith, who teams are obviously going to try to hurry up and clamp down on and cause problems for.
Something that's happening more and more too is they're pressing them. So by the time Purdue gets into its offense, there's 15 seconds left on the shot clock.
Yeah, and it's not even, it's not even like a relentless full court press. It's just enough of like a little trap that like slows them down. But again, they're seeing it multiple times. Like, what is the answer? What's the next step? What's the bounce back from that? I think one of the other things that's happening too, you mentioned the Fletcher Lawyer thing. I mean, Buzz Williams is a good coach. One of their guys is shooting 52% they shoot from 3, and it's not a guy who's just thrown up a couple. Like, it's one of the regular 3-point shooters is just bombing the ball at a national leading rate this season. You're going to pay attention to that, right? And Fletcher Lawyer did a great job in the first half of scoring besides that. His mid-range was working. He was he had that steal that went in for a layup. Like, he was scoring in other ways, getting free throw line. Like, he got 12 points the first half, didn't even attempt a 3-pointer, and then went scoreless in the second half.
Either.
Right. And then went scoreless in the second half. And like, it seems sometimes that those extremes are happening too, where a guy is obviously playing well in some capacity for a half, and then maybe he disappears too. I just keep coming back to if you're going to turn the ball over that much, it cannot be accompanied by, and on top of that, they knew they were not going to be able to keep Texas A&M off the boards.
Right.
It's the best offensive rebounding team in the country by like any metric that's out there. They thrive on it. They actually had less than they usually do today. They had 14. I think they averaged 16. They only scored 9 second chance points. If you come into this game and told Purdue, okay, they're going to outscore you 9-4 on second chance points, but you're going to outscore them 17-2 on the fast break, don't you think Purdue would have taken that?
Absolutely.
But the problem is that doesn't tell you how many times they turn the ball over. Purdue turns the ball over 16 times. And a lot of them came in like at the start of the second half that allowed Texas A&M to sort of take control of this game.
Yeah, and I think one thing that really probably gets overlooked, and not only that Texas A&M was really good defensively, the length and athleticism, the physicality too, but I think that length shut down passing lanes. Purdue threw some passes that normally are there. The balls were knocked away. There was one time where Fletcher Lawyer comes down the court, turns around to hand off for what I feel
Yeah.
like every game is a wide open 3, and there's a guy just standing there and he catches the ball. So
and that happened almost right where we're standing, actually. And Matt Painter was right in front of Matt Painter, and his reaction to that was I led my insider with it. Like, he just kind of turned and like put his hands on his head and was like, what are you going to do? And there were a few frustrating moments like that for him tonight. I'm thinking back to a play where CJ Cox had to play more in this game. And early in the game, it was because Braden Smith got bashed in the face and had to leave the game for a little bit. So let's factor that into our assessment of Braden Smith. He got beat up today in a couple of ways, grabbing his ankle late in the game when he got twisted up. Like, it was a tough game. It was a hard physical game. But I also don't know that Purdue responded to that across the board the best way. But CJ Cox early in this game, and actually it was the second half, he gets the ball at the top of the key, starts to drive it, could have gone up for a shot, but instead, or could have thrown to a completely wide open Braden Smith over on the edge, and instead he tries to toss into the post. It gets stolen. Like, there were just a lot of times like that where Purdue feels like it's getting sped up. To me, it comes back to, and I didn't cover this team last year, but I watched it on several occasions, and you watched Purdue just dictate terms to teams last year. A lot of that was just Zach Edey. You have a generational player, and he changed the game, and you played through him so effectively. But this year, when they lose games, all 3 of their losses have been an example of the opponent coming out and dictating terms and Purdue not responding effectively to that. This is sufficiently to that.
Yeah, and listen, today ended up being a 4-point game. It felt more like a 10-point game.
It was a 12-point game with just a few minutes left.
Yeah, Purdue made a late flurry. Did have a 9-0 run early in the second half that it absolutely had to have if it had any chance of this game. But those were few and far between. And you're absolutely right. Every time I felt like, Purdue just needs to get a stop here. And then there was an instance where I think it was Braden Smith cut, and was Zurich, the point guard, just runs right by him and gets an and one at the bucket. And it's like, man, like every time Purdue put itself in position to where like it could strike, it would give up something. A lot of threes, and Texas A&M is not a great 3-point shooting team. I think Painter said the percentage was 29% against Power 5 programs this year. So I think they were willing to give that up. Unfortunately, today they hit them. So
no, I was tweeting. Can we still say tweeting? I was posting about that during the game, that this was a Texas A&M team that came in shooting like 28% for the season from 3, and they spent a lot of this game over 50%. They were 6 of 12 at halftime, and then the first possession of the game, I remember his last name is Hefner and his first name starts with an H. I can't remember the kid's actual name,
number 2,
because I kept thinking Hugh Hefner, but he hits a 3. He hits a 3 to start the second half. So at that point, there's 7 of 13 from 3 for a team that came in shooting 28%. And that was the other thing that happened here, which was a team came out, and I thought Texas A&M played to its identity extremely well. Like, even if it didn't quite get to where it is usually on the offensive boards, it also didn't make as many shots or miss as many shots as it usually does. So by a percentage, I actually should go back and look at that. By a percentage, it might have been just as good or better than they are in any given game. But they're crashing the offensive boards. They're using their athleticism, their length to cause you problems on defense. And then they're trying to score athletically as well. And they know they're giving up things in transition with the way they crash the boards, but they're willing to do it because they're so good at it. And then on top of all that, it got a 3-point shooting night that it usually doesn't get. It was about 10% higher than it usually is from 3. They're about, 30%, I think, coming in, and they shot 40.6. They had a guy, the guy you just mentioned, Zurich. Yeah. He came into the game shooting like 28% from 3, and he made his first 2 threes of the night. Like, just stuff like that. And then on the other side of it, I thought Purdue did not play to its identity in a lot of ways. And then all that adds up to how you lose a game by 4 points.
Yeah. I think the concerning thing that comes out of this is Purdue has to get production off the bench, and it can't be CJ Cox, because that's not going to be consistently there. Aside from CJ Cox, I don't know if anybody off the bench scored today. Riley Burgess didn't even play.
It was rough,
and Trey Kaufman-Renn was in foul trouble. The post gives you no points outside of him. And I asked Matt Painter about it after the game, and he said, listen, we've had one good offensive post player in the past. He mentioned Carl Landry and Juwan Johnson. Those 2 guys played in the NBA. I don't know if Trey Kaufman-Renn is the talent to get there, but that can't be your only option offensively in the post.
Yeah, and I think on many nights it will be. there's going to be nights where Trey Kaufman-Renn goes for 26 and 11, and it's fine. But when he is playing so inefficiently, either from the influence of the defense, or as a corresponding to that, turning the ball over himself in the post, when it's a combination of those things are happening, he's having a really inefficient night. I think he had 11 points on 3 of 9 shooting and 5 turnovers. Like, it's a really inefficient night. When he does that, and then Caleb First and Will Berg come in and play 18 minutes where they have no points and 1 rebound, that is just a chasm of production in the front court that I don't think Purdue can sustain. Like, you have to shoot an insane percentage from the field and from 3-point range and not turn the ball over at all other places to overcome that. And it just wasn't happening. And I think at some point, like, this isn't going to be the last. Matt Painter was asked a couple questions in the post game about getting into a game this physical and responding, and him saying, like, well, this isn't the first team we've seen that's this physical. And he's not wrong. There have been other examples, but there's other examples where they have kind of not met the challenge against a physical team. This is not the last physical team that they're going to play this season. Maybe not the last physical team they're going to play this month, right, but certainly not this season. I mean, Big Ten is notoriously rugged, and they're going to see more teams like this. And I think they need to have a more physical, like, the guys are bringing in off the bench do not confidently step up against the physical challenge that they're seeing,
that they're going to see in 7 days against another SEC opponent. So,
oh yeah, by the way, yeah. So so they played Texas A&M on a not really that neutral of a court and lost by 4. Auburn, who they're going to play next Saturday, played on an actual neutral court in Atlanta against Ohio State and beat them by 38 points, which is like what Purdue is supposed to do to Texas A&M Corpus Christi or whoever. Like, that's who you're supposed to trounce by 38 points, not other Power 4 teams and ones with winning records like Ohio State. And so now Purdue's about to go down to Birmingham, which is like, it's a 2-hour drive from Auburn. So I guess it's more neutral than this is, but it's not that neutral. There's going to be mostly Auburn fans in that stadium, I would imagine, in that arena, I would imagine. And that might be the best team. Now, that might not just be the best team Purdue has faced so far or will face this season. It might be the best team in the country. Auburn is really, really, really good, as that score would indicate. And I think they've, it's almost good for them that they get a week now to absorb this loss and take lessons from it, but then also prepare maybe in some specific ways for what Auburn's going to do.
The good thing about this stretch of the season, and I feel like I have asked Matt Painter about this the last 2 years, is finals are over now, so that stress is gone. You're playing a couple neutral court games, a bye game, and then you jump into conference play. But this little stretch here gives you time to kind of relax, regroup, and then you're playing some really good basketball in the midst of all of that. But the real telling sign will be come January 2nd, I think, when Big Ten play starts. Like, all this is behind you, but you've got to use everything that this is over and done with tonight. You take this, you get better from it. That's why you play these games, as Matt Painter continues to point out, and why he schedules so tough. But you've got to use it to your advantage and get better going forward. And then, when you do come into a team like this, which would probably be like a second-round matchup or a Sweet 16 game, you've got to kind of recollect what happened in this game and figure out ways to beat the more physical, more athletic teams.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting into a juncture of the season where we have to make sure that we're not, because you can only judge a team against its own standard. But I think Purdue's standard is that it gets on the court with the best teams in the country and gives it as well as it takes it or whatever, and can beat those teams. And it has done that this season. So let's not pretend like this loss doesn't negate beating Alabama, doesn't negate beating Ole Miss. Like, they've beat other really good teams. Beating Maryland at home last Sunday, that was a bit of a, like, I wouldn't say like a back against the wall moment, but Fletcher Lawyer did say when we talked to him this week that, like, they looked at it as like a win or go home kind of game, because to start off 0-2 in Big Ten play with this many teams kind of clustered all together as potential contenders in the Big Ten would have been a tough start. And they found a way to win that game. So they've done good things. And we said all along, this was going to be a team that had to sort of develop into what it's going to be. And to be 8-3 right now is not everything they wanted to be. And especially when you consider one of those 3 losses was that just really folding the tent against Penn State in such a horrific way. But at the same time, you still see how this team is progressing, like just switching to the small ball look after starting off with a different look, and recovering from the injury there, like, and a loss of of Jacobson, who was going to be an important person on this team. Like, that was part of this development. The thing that I'm looking at is development can include just kind of nothing from the rest of the post players on this team. I don't think that can include some guys on this team right now. Even though I look at this game and I'm like, okay, well, maybe you should play this game in February, and that's just the night where Miles Colvin hits one of the first 5 threes that he missed, or maybe Jakari Harris has gotten three. He's shooting 16% from 3 right now. Maybe he's kind of pushed through the wall, and now he hits a 3 earlier in this game. Like, one basket or one less turnover that leads to a basket changes the complexion of the final minute of this game in a lot of ways and makes it more winnable. So that is also still on the table. Like, that's how close they are. And I think in some ways they'll look at a game like this on film and they'll lament the mistakes, but they'll also see that it's right there, and that means something too.
But I feel like this team collectively, from the 3 juniors, from Lawyer, from Smith, and Kaufman-Wren, they have to give you 45 to 50 points collectively, probably every game, for you to have a chance to win, realistically. But you do need those other guys to step up, whether Miles Colvin comes in and gives you 10, Heidi gives you 10. You get CJ Cox is a guy who I think probably has some more moments like we saw against Alabama. He had 10 points today, but he also didn't pull the trigger on a shot that I think Matt Painter really wanted him to, based on the profanity-laced words that came out of his mouth after he didn't take the shot. So there's some growth here for sure still. And kind of what I wrote after the game was Trey Kaufman-Wren going into today, led the Big Ten in usage rate. And, that's great, especially considering he was giving you like 18.5 points and 6 or 7 rebounds, 2.5 assists a game. But that wasn't the plan going into the season. Daniel Jacobson was supposed to be a big part of this. Daniel Jacobson's probably a guy who helps you because he's 7'3", 7'4" against a team like this that is very good at rebounding, and it's kind of had to adjust on the fly a little bit. But you've got to get help from the bench. That's the bottom line. And I thought maybe this was a game where you use Raleigh Burgess just because you needed to throw more bodies in there. We didn't see him. I think he's a guy that probably over the next 2 weeks we're going to see, like, how can he help us? Can he help Purdue in the Big Ten? Because pretty soon these rotations are going to be down to 7 or 8 guys. It's kind of how Matt Painter has done this throughout 2 decades now. Is he kind of messes with things until you get to Big Ten play, and then he's got a rotation set.
Yeah, and I think it is probably getting close to setting, but I think that door is open. It was funny. I was sitting next to my star colleague, Greg Doyle, tonight, and when they came out for the second half warm-ups, Raleigh Burgess, who didn't play, was not in his warm-up. He was just in his jersey. And Greg was like, do you think that means he's going to play to start the second half? I said, no, it does not mean he's going to play to start the second half. But the door is open for, just as it was for him at the start of the year. And the reason why he didn't redshirt, I think we're seeing why he didn't redshirt in some of the other performances that we're seeing in the front court. But I think so, and because he had that option and chose not to do it, I think Matt Painter is going to keep revisiting that as an option. But it's an option that Burgess has to seize in practice. I think from what we've seen, I think he would probably, from a physical standpoint, hold up as well as anybody else. But there's a lot that goes into playing that position, whether it's setting screens, whether it is knowing the defensive system as well as some of the older guys would. Like, there's a lot that goes into it that I think is still part of a learning process for him. So I don't discount them. If we have this discussion again in February, just kind of put a pin on this and say what happens in the next month to 5 weeks to 6 weeks that changes how we look at this front court. But I think you're right that if there's going to be nights where teams limit Kaufman-Wren, there's going to be nights where he's just a little bit off. They got to get something else from that front court.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll transition. One of the more notable fans who were in attendance tonight was sitting kind of off to my right here was Barry Odom, the newly hired head football coach of Purdue, who now has a hole to fill in his program.
Yeah, so the hole was already there. Dillon Thieneman committed out of the transfer portal to Oregon tonight. I don't think that caught anybody by surprise. I had sort of resigned myself and just the way people were talking about it, that this had been coming for a while. And I know that the snap reaction to this probably feels like, well, this is just like last winter. Like Nick Skouwerton goes to Texas A&M, Deion Burks goes to Oklahoma. Like people are just going to keep leaving. And my response to that is, this did not ever feel to me like a guy chasing a dollar. This to me felt like a guy who is told by a lot of people, including people at Purdue, that he's one of the best players in college football, and probably doesn't want to. He didn't tell me this. This is my read. Does he really want to do another 2 or 3 win season at best, possibly, to finish his career? And if you've got the best teams in the country who watched you play all year, like we know he had this visit to Oregon, we know he was set up for a visit for Ohio State, like 2 Big Ten teams that are as good as any teams in the country, programs in the country, scouted you all year and said, we want you to come be a part of our program next year when we're still going to be chasing a national championship. And that's kind of my cautionary tale out of all this for Purdue. I just wrote a thing for IndyStar.com about it, like a quick reaction, that don't get caught up in what people's NIL budgets are, because if Purdue doesn't start winning, it's going to keep losing players. If you don't fix the winning, you're not going to fix the leak of talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's still some guys that are in the portal that people are wondering if Purdue can draw back, and they're in a similar situation. Will Held is visiting Clemson, I believe.
Yeah, just visited LSU also. Yeah. So 2 teams that have won a national championship in the past decade.
Right, and obviously Max Clare is a guy that's highly sought after as well. So you don't want to say that Purdue's a farm team, but it's going to be that way if it keeps losing and bringing in players and having to play them, as freshmen and sophomores, just because of attrition and because of a lack of talent. And then those guys get spotted, and the people who maybe missed them in recruiting the first time or missed out on them, then have a chance to bring you in. Like if you're a college football player and you don't want to go to Oregon, let alone all the Nike money and all that stuff that's out there right now, it's it's a team that in this structure of the current day of college football is set up, I think, for success with a young coach in Dan Lanning, who's got a chance to win a national championship this year. It's an easy sell, I think, to recruits to say, like, hey, you're playing at this school and not winning. Come here, you're going to play and you're going to win. And, then from there, you can talk about dollars and cents of it all.
When I look at players like Dillon Thieneman, like Will Helt and Max Clare, Thieneman was the most extreme example of it from this past year, right? Because a year ago, from talking to people around him, there were definitely programs out there that were like putting out feelers. He never went in the portal, so they couldn't talk to him. But there was definitely some like background, like, hey, would he think about going in the portal off of that 4-8 season when he was as good as he was? Like, there probably was more money out there for him than he ever got at Purdue, and he declined that. And I think part of it was, or didn't pursue it, never went in the portal, and part of it was maybe just out of loyalty to Purdue. Probably belief in the fact that, okay, it was a 4-8 season, but belief in the program taking a step forward and the vision that Ryan Walters had and all that stuff. There was also, for his case, and did talk to him directly about this a little bit, that some of these teams that were reaching out were people that he really wanted to give a consideration to as far as playing when he came out of Westfield, and got a cold shoulder from them, got kind of like, all right, we're recruiting you, but not really much zeal from them for it. And I think he was rejecting all of that. But now you're looking at a situation where you may only have 1 year of college football left. And that's also true for Will Helt if he's that good and decides to leave after a year. And it's also true for Max Clare. Like, all those guys could be draft eligible a year from now. And where do you want to spend your last year of college football? Do you want to spend it in a rebuild, or do you want to spend it? And I'm sorry, I know Barry Odom doesn't like that term, but I don't know what else you would call what's probably waiting for this team next year.
I think it's just a build. There's no in.
Well, yeah, but you're looking at what this roster is right now, and I think it's also, I wonder when fans are going to start to feel like this almost goes in its own category. Like, it's a third-year guy. You knew he might leave. He left. Okay, but like, you're watching a lot of other teams out there be very active right now. And it's only been a week, but it's also been a week, and it doesn't feel, you're not seeing a lot of activity yet for Purdue in this realm. You're only seeing guys leaving, or guys who say they might leave, visiting other places, and you're only seeing the guys come out of the portal that corresponds typically with someone better, it appears, leaving for the portal or going somewhere. And I'm curious, like, when we're going to start to see the first like momentum in favor of Purdue football as it relates to this transfer portal, because this roster right now is pretty chewed up. I'm not telling tales out of school. Like, they've got to go get some talent.
Yeah, and there were some guys who, Mike Bobinski, the day after firing Ryan Walters, said he had talked to the team, said, hey, be patient until we find our coach, and then give that guy a chance. And there were some people who immediately jumped in the portal, which was expected, but there were some players also who did wait and got a chance to meet Barry Odom, I assume, and then decided, you know what, I'm probably better off going in the portal. One of those guys was Jamal Edrin, who I believe yesterday decided to jump in the portal. And you look at his stats last year, not great over the course of a season, but he was definitely probably your best wide receiver on the team last year, if not Jerron Tibbs, who jumped in the portal before he ever met Barry Odom. So,
well, and again, everybody's having, I think, these conversations in good faith, and there might be players who, even after that conversation with Mike Bobinski, are like, yeah, you know what, I think I might like to give this a shot. Let's see how it goes. But let's use this example. Jerron Tibbs goes in transfer portal. Within a couple of days, you see that he's got visits to Rutgers, Wake Forest, like other teams that are accustomed to winning, by and large, to some extent. Not like Rutgers is one of the best teams in the Big Ten, but they fight for like bowl contention. And Wake Forest has been a really good program, at least by ACC standards, for the past few years. But like and I can't remember who else he had offers from, but there were a couple more. Louisville, exactly, and we know the Louisville connection. But like, there's other. So then, if you're Jamal Edrin and you look at that, and word probably filters out as to like what monetarily these guys are maybe getting offered compared to what Purdue can or is willing to do right now, like, I would go look around too. Like, why? Because that might change your mind. You might not have thought going in. There have definitely been some guys who Cole Brevard just, I think, committed to Texas today. Someone told, like, just before we came out here, and like, so a guy who was like good for Purdue is like going to a playoff team. It sounds like, I mean, like so, and had some other visits set up, and that, like, again, it's telling you the talent that was here, how it was underutilized, and there wasn't enough of it. But what was here, I think, was underutilized, and that's what gets you to this point where players, it's not just about money. Like, players are going to look around and say, where can I be happier next year? Even if they were getting more money here to some extent. Do you want to go through another season of way, way, way more losses than wins, which it's too early to say for sure, but that's certainly one of the possible outcomes for next year.
Right now, there's a lot of unknowns with this roster because, like you said, I haven't seen people in the portal saying, got an offer from Purdue, or I'm setting up a visit to go to Purdue. And I actually got a direct message on X that was like, hey, where are all the portal guys that are supposed to be coming to Purdue? Because when this hire was going down, like somebody had asked Mike Bobinski, it's not only bringing a coach, they're bringing a coach who can bring players. And he said yes and yes. And so far, we haven't seen the players who have come with him. So.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, that is the one kind of like X factor right now, because UNLV still has a bowl game to play. That's true. It's coming up soon, right? Is it just, it's this week or next week, right? It's soon. I imagine we're going to start to get some answers after that. Now, the other thing to remember, though, is that UNLV's roster this year was very senior heavy.
30 seniors.
Yeah, it was very senior heavy. Some of their very best players were seniors. That receiver that they have that was really good, I think, actually has another year of eligibility, but I've also seen him projected as like a day 2 NFL draft pick, so I don't think he's probably coming back. So I would not expect like a windfall of guys who are probably going to step on the field and make a huge difference in year one. I think this could also be guys who come in and are part of like a developmental plan, but how many guys are going to come in and be great from day one? That remains to be seen. It's just, there's a lot, but I understand if you're a fan out there who's kind of wondering like, well, what's going on? Like, is there any traction? You're not hearing a lot about even visits right now of guy. Maybe Purdue's trying to keep those quiet, but it hasn't filtered to me yet that there's a lot of visits and things going on.
Kind of to your point there, I've been looking at 30 years of data at Power 4 programs who have hired a new head coach in football and just kind of the best turnarounds in one season. And I think there were 29 instances. I'm writing about this tonight or tomorrow or at some point in the very near future. 29 instances where a new head coach was hired and that program won 5 or more games than the previous season. But a lot of times I'm noticing those coaches come in and go win 3 or 4 games, and then you see that second year, you see that big jump. Like it's happened quite a bit. The ones who have done it, a lot of times are obviously Curt Cignetti would be one, but like Urban Meyer has done it twice. There's a lot of big name coaches that are the guys. Steve Sarkisian, I think, has done it twice. But it's always these kind of names that if you follow college football, you're like, oh, okay, that's a really good coach who went to a program that was struggling, then turned it around pretty quickly, and then ended up, obviously parlay. So I think that, if you're a Purdue fan, the more realistic take or approach here is to kind of assume this is not a 1-year turnaround and you're not going to have some Indiana type season next year. It's probably more likely that you have to be patient and wait 2 or 3 years for a payoff of this head coaching hire. But it remains to be seen because everybody wants to win now. We still don't know how Purdue is going to handle this supposed influx of NIL money that they seem to think that they have on their hands right now. And then obviously once you get into the revenue sharing, it changes the whole game completely.
Well, yeah, it's not really so much about the influx of NIL money right now. That's not really what Mike Bobinski and Barry Odom were talking about earlier this week. It's more that it is that money that's out there starting July 1st, and that you can negotiate based on that. You can negotiate saying like, okay, as of July 1st, this is what you'll start getting paid because we know what our budget is going to be. But if you're Oregon and you've got like $20 million laying around just for football, and or close to it, and you're dealing with a fraction of that at Purdue, then you can offer more money today because Purdue can only offer so much money today. So that's where for this cycle, it's still an uneven world. They think it's going to even out more by next year. We'll see if that turns out to be true. But right now, it's still a very uneven world. But I still keep coming back to, I wonder if they were like 4-8 again and had shown, because I had even said before the season, I thought 4-8 could be a sign of progress with the schedule this bad. Like, would they still be enough momentum going that this team, this group, led by these guys that we're talking about, would say, you know what, we're coming back for another shot at this, and we're going to take the next step next year. Problem is the schedule isn't a whole lot easier. It's still got 3 playoff teams on it, and the 2 teams that played for the 2023 national championship. So that's 5 of your 12 games right there. It's not going to be substantially easier than this year's schedule was. You could probably even crunch it in some ways and come up with a way that it's tougher because you've still got Illinois on there. You've still got some other good teams on there. So it's not going to be an easy season next year. And I think we're all eager to find out when this roster starts to assemble, and we'll be following that in the coming weeks.
And the coaching roster,
and the coaching. Well, that's a factor here though, right, too, because if you're trying to recruit guys out of the portal, they're gonna be like, all right, well, who's my position coach? Who's my coordinator? And you're like, oh, hold on, we'll get to that in a second. I'm not trying to mock them. It's just this is what you go through when there's a coaching change too. Like you're picking a coach whose team is playing in a bowl game, and you want him to bring assistants, you want him to bring players, but out of respect, those guys aren't going to like leave and walk away from the thing that they've achieved this year to come here. I mean, Barry Odom had to, but they gave him $39 million reasons. For everybody else, I think it's more prudent for them to finish that job and then make decisions about coming here.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we'll sign off here from Gainbridge Fieldhouse. I think they're ready to peel up the court here and make it look like the Indiana Pacers play here again. So we'll step out. We'll have a Boilers Extra, I assume, probably sometime this week, Thursday or thereabouts.
Ish.
Yeah. All right.
He's going to Birmingham. I'm not, but we'll have full coverage.
I'm going to Chicago first, but it's nothing related to Purdue athletics.
Oh, okay. Well, we didn't need to know that. But then he's going to Birmingham, and I'll be on my couch, but we'll be watching basketball next week. But yes, follow us, indystar.com, jconline.com. We'll get you updates on what is going on with this coaching staff and this roster all week. Thanks for joining us.